Hi, my name is Michael McGuire, and this professional development session will focus on incorporating higher level thinking into your classrooms. This is a great professional development for new teachers, and it's a great refresher for veteran teachers as well. There are four things we're going to talk about today that will allow you to incorporate higher level um, learning into your classrooms. The first we're going to talk about is questioning strategies, how to use higher DOK levels. The second thing we're going to talk about is claimed evidence reasoning writing assignments that are a great way to incorporate higher level learning. We're going to talk about how you can incorporate classroom debates into your classroom. And we're also going to barely touch on inquiry-based lessons. You would need several professional development sessions alone to focus on inquiry-based alone. So we're just going to touch on the key points today. One thing you can use to increase higher level thinking in your classrooms are questioning strategies, okay? So every day on my board, I post an essential question. I also have an ongoing essential question for the overarching theme of the unit. Oftentimes, these questions are complicated and they will not be able to be answered after the first day, but over the course of the unit, the students will then be able to answer them, okay? Um, Here are some DOK levels when using questioning. It's okay to have DOKs level 1 and 2 because kids need background information of things, but we like to try to work up into 3 and then 4 if possible. Um, for example, I would ask a student, what is the relationship between cellular respiration and photosynthesis, okay? So if you see over here, what is the relationship? That is a DOK level 4. But before we could get to that, we would have lessons on cellular respiration and photosynthesis as well. And then as a culminating activity towards the end of the unit, you could use this questioning to see students' understanding, okay? Also, when you ask students these types of questions, you want to allow students time to think and formulate their responses. Oftentimes, we don't give students enough time when we're questioning them and we just move on. Allow them to stop and think about it and assess it and maybe talk about it with to a partner sitting next to them and then formulate their idea. Okay. Furthermore, ask students for evidence to support their answers when you're questioning them. And also, if you see the opportunity when you ask them questions and they come up with their responses, extend that questioning, ask them they could tell me more about that topic, okay? Or how does that topic relate to this? What are the implications of that topic? Um, Here is a DOK wheel that you can use to reference for questioning. However, it is not the end all be all, okay? There are certain situations in which a what question may actually be a higher level question and a how question may be a lower level question, okay? For example, if I asked a student, how does a plant convert solar energy into chemical energy? And if they just answered photosynthesis, I didn't really get a lot out of them, okay? But if I ask them, what is the relationship between acceleration and photosynthesis, they have to make more connections in that situation. Um, Also, towards the end of the unit, I like to revisit previous essential questions from daily lessons. I have students search for connections and identify overarching themes and principles from these questions. I look for, I ask the students what implications do these principles have for prior units? How can they relate the information they learned in this unit to prior units, okay? And then I even preview what we're gonna learn about in the future, and I ask them what implications the lesson might have for future units, okay? And additionally, maybe the most important thing, I ask students what implications do these principles have for one's everyday life, okay? So I asked them to make connections between what you have learned and how you could actually use that in everyday life. For example, if I taught students that as you move up a food pyramid, energy decreases. You have the most energy at the bottom level of producers. And therefore, if we talked about population and population growth, and I asked students, knowing what you know about the food pyramid, or not, sorry, the food pyramid, the energy pyramid, if you were a farmer trying to feed the most amount of people, what approach might you take? Or how would you go about that? And then if the students had put it together very well, they would say, well, maybe I would use all my land to plant crops because I know that as I go up the food pyramid, if I raise livestock, I've lost energy. The next thing I use in my classroom to increase higher level thinking is I give a lot of claims, evidence, reasoning, writing assignments. CER can be a great literacy strategy, which incorporates writing. I'll provide the students with an article. For example, I gave them a lengthy article on whether or not viruses should be considered living things. Technically, in biology, they are not considered living things because they need a host to reproduce. But there are people that make arguments that they share a lot of characteristics with living things, and there are arguments to be made that they should be considered living things. So in this situation, the student would make a claim. The student would say, yes, I think viruses should be considered living things, or no, I do not think they should be. And then they provide evidence, and then they would use reasoning, and then they would write that up. I typically allow students to do this on their own or in pairs. I give them a lot of time to work on this, and then I'll typically have some of them present their claims, evidence, reasoning assignment afterwards. Okay. Now, I want to make it clear, this is not just for use in science classrooms. It works really well in science classrooms, okay? But you could use it for other subjects as well, okay? For example, in a current issues class, maybe you could ask them, should universal basic income be considered? I don't know too much about this topic, but I do know it's a hot topic. And it's a topic that you could take either side on, and then you could use that claim, provide some evidence, and then reasoning, okay? And maybe in English class, I know at our school, the classes all listen to the podcast Serial, which looks at the case of Adnan Syed, and they have to choose whether or not they think he is guilty. I don't know if they have to write anything about it now, but they could definitely use CER for that assignment. Classroom debates are another great way in which I incorporate higher level thinking. And a lot of times they build on the CER assignments, okay? So I will choose a controversial or hot button topic with two different sides. For example, in my class, I typically use, should the woolly mammoth be brought back from extinction or not? And this, kids get very passionate about this topic. It's very interesting, both for and against, okay? I will group the students and give them time to develop their position and key points, okay? And then I act as a facilitator. I don't interrupt very much, just if it's getting a little out of hand. But before time, I establish clear rules about respect, and I give a lot of guidelines. For the most part, though, I just act as a facilitator. I'll sometimes bring in other questions that maybe the students didn't think about. For the most part, it goes really well, and the students get really into it, and they kind of take responsibility for their own learning in the situation. Finally, I'm just going to hit on the key points of inquiry-based lessons. Like I said before, you would need several professional development sessions to hit it all, okay? But the whole point of it is the student learning is the center of the focus. And there are a few key steps. You have students develop questions, and it's typically something that they're passionate about or want to know more about. Okay, they identify what they want to learn about, and you can kind of guide it a little bit, but you want them to come up with things that they're interested in. Maybe you can persuade them a little bit, but they have to initially start that process. It's important to give students time in class to research it, because they might not exactly know how to research it. So you want, even though they're in charge of this learning process, you want to be there a little bit to give a little guidance when needed. But you also allow them time outside of class to research their questions as well. Next, students will need to present their findings to the class. All right, and that helps the class learn as well. And then finally, the students look back at the whole process of the lesson. And they reflect on their own approach to answering their own questions, how they went about researching it and how they did that. And they think, did I do this part right? Maybe I should have done this. So technically, they would learn to think about their own thinking. So these are all some great methods that can be used to incorporate higher level thinking into your classrooms. And I hope this is beneficial to you in the future.